face.
Day one would take us all the way to Fredonia, Arizona, where we had a B&B waiting. Fredonia would serve as our base to explore the area. Somehow we almost ran out of gas in the first hour. That's flashing empty, and the remaining miles is 0. Great start. Along the way I had hoped to stop and do some photography and to fly my drone, but most of the drive was across reservation land, and they had been hit hard by the pandemic, so it was still essentially closed. They also don't like outsiders flying drones, so I'd be limited to photography and then only on the side of the road. This is Gallup, New Mexico, where the pandemic had been so bad last summer that they blocked all traffic in and out with state police and National Guard. Somewhere out here, one of Eddie's friends from high school ended up manning a checkpoint. We stopped off the road just south of Tuba City at our first clear view of the Navajo sandstone, which we're going to see a lot of in the next few days. As a photographer, I love its colors, the reds and yellows and even pristine white. This was my first chance to take some landscapes, and even though the light wasn't great and we were just on the side of the road, it was good practice. The texture of the clouds added a lot. I really like this cloud ring centered at the peak of the cliff. The next leg would take us north along the Echo Cliffs, which were gorgeous. These are the western escarpment of a mesa called the Cayabito Plateau with rocks of the Wingate and Navajo sandstone. I really wanted to drive off down a side road to get some photographs, but we were still on the reservation. We did pull off again, and I got this picture, which I call litter on weed by fence. Sometimes you have to make do. The next stop was the Navajo Bridge over the Colorado River at Marble Canyon, which caught this guy off guard. His camera is pointing the wrong way. Fudge. He said, fudge. There we go. The Navajo Bridge is a steel spandrel arch that was dedicated in 1929. It needed to be replaced, but people wanted to save it, so in 1995 they built a second bridge just like it, right next to it. These are the highest bridges in the United States. The river is 467 feet below. After crossing the river, we would be away from the reservation, and I really wanted to fly my drone along the Vermilion Cliffs at sunset. Doesn't that sound great? But the light was wrong and it was too windy, so we drove north along a dirt road where we ended up at a condor viewing site. California condors were placed on the endangered species list in 1967. Only 22 condors were known to remain in 1982. Back in those days, we used to visit what was then called the San Diego Wild Animal Park, where they bred condors to save them. Today, the world population exceeds 400. About 75 condors reside in the Vermilion Cliffs National Monument. Condors? Why not?
They're here in the spring and fall. Usually in the summer you find them on the south rim of the Grand Canyon.
We should go there.
Yeah, we're going to go to the north rim instead.
We waited for the sun to set the cliffs aglow for a photograph, but the light wasn't great. So we headed back toward the main road, and then I looked to my left and saw this. On day 2, the plan was to make a clockwise circle. starting with Bryce Canyon National Park on the north end, and then to Kodachrome State Park, returning along Cottonwood Canyon Road. Bryce was amazing. We started at a place called Fairyland Canyon. The rocks are made out of limestone, siltstone, dolomite, and mudstone. Each erodes at a different rate, creating these vertical structures called hoodoos. The park is named after Ebenezer Bryce, who settled the nearby Paria Valley with his family in 1875. Unfortunately, drones aren't allowed in national parks. There are lots of trails of all lengths and difficulty. Parking is very limited, so we rode a bus and then hiked from there along the rim, taking advantage of the fact that we didn't have to return to our car. Even though the best light of the morning was long gone, I did get some photographs of this spectacular landscape. Our next stop was Kodachrome State Park, where I hoped to fly my drone. This park is more off the beaten path. We had the place mostly to ourselves. Its main attraction are sandstone spires. This big one is called Chimney Rock. It was too windy to fly, so I took some more photographs. Many of these spires look a lot like something else. And they're just everywhere. The afternoon was hot, so we got back in the car and started down the Cottonwood Canyon Road, which is dirt. There are interesting rock formations along the way, and I was looking for something to photograph or fly my drone around in the glow of sunset. But, alas, we ran into this. Only it was much more flooded. There was no way we were going to ford a creek in Kathleen's pretty red Prius, which was ironic given what would happen 24 hours later. So we decided to head on back the way we came, with just enough time to get to the sand dunes east of Kanab before sunset, which isn't too far from where we were staying. Once again, my hope was to fly my drone. On the way there, I imagined glowing dunes, bathed in the light of sunset, with red cliffs in the background. We arrived in time, and it was magical. It was exactly what I had hoped for. This is Coral Pink Sand Dunes State Park. That ridge is the edge of the Mockwith Mountains. back in the Middle Jurassic, there were these ancient dune fields where dinosaurs once walked. As time passed, they were buried, where the heat and pressure turned them into rock, called the Navajo sandstone. Exposed to the elements today, the sandstone breaks down into sand grains again, and the wind, as it funnels between the mountains, picks up the grains and then deposits them here, creating the modern dune field, rising from the dust of the ancient one. Day 3 would take us south to the north rim of the Grand Canyon.
Is it getting the car in front of us, for instance?
Probably.
We started at the visitor center. It was a bit crowded, but once we found a place to park, it wasn't that bad.
Don't jump in a trip and fall underneath. Right?
Chris has one speed and he's not stopping.
We took a short hike along the rim. This is the view from a bench. Probably the 4 millionth picture here, but still pretty nice. After that, we drove up to Point Imperial, which is the highest viewpoint in the park. The most distinctive feature is the lonely tower of Mount Hayden. In the distance, we could see the plume of smoke from a fire near Flagstaff. The view to the northeast included Marble Canyon, where we crossed the Navajo Bridge, and the Vermilion Cliffs, where I took photos at the Condor site on our first day. As the sun got low in the sky, we moved on to Cape Royal, where the sunsets were supposed to be good for photography. It turned out to be a bit of a hike from the parking lot, so I grabbed my camera and tripod and walked fast because I didn't want to miss the light. I made a beeline straight to the center of the viewing area, slammed the tripod down, and began looking for a composition. A gazillion photos had been taken from this very spot, but it was all new to me. These guys were pretty funny. There were 3 of them, very serious, with their equipment bags and expensive cameras. This guy is carrying 2 of them. They seemed kind of annoyed that I was there. They kept giving me looks. What makes the Grand Canyon so awesome to photograph is the depth. It's just layer upon layer, from up close to the main subject, to the background, distant background, canyon wall, and even mountains in the distance. My hope was that the Kaibab limestone would reflect the sunset colors, and the redder Coconino sandstone would light up in glorious red and yellow. Here's the composition. I made 92 exposures as the sun set. Let's see how it turned out. As the light faded on Wotan's throne, I noticed the moon and Venus, so I set up for another shot. The other guys watched me and muttered to themselves, and one of them asked his buddy what the bright object next to the moon was. His friend, looking at his phone, said it was Mars. Well, it clearly wasn't Mars. Mars isn't that bright, and it's red. Kathleen overheard and loudly asked, "Greg, what is that next to the moon?" Fixed on my camera, I replied, "It's Venus." There was more muttering, and I heard one of them say, "But Venus is way out behind the moon," which made me chuckle. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm photographing. We left them to the photos they were planning of the galactic core, which is what photographers call the Milky Way. I hope they got that right, because that could be a spectacular photograph. On the drive back to Fredonia, it was very dark. We were the only car on the road. We passed a deer crossing sign, which made me nervous, and then a buffalo crossing sign. That's when I started to slow down more, working the cruise control. There was a sudden flash of a deer crossing the road, and before my foot could even reach the brake pedal, there was this enormous hollow plastic thud, and we were on the side of the road. I got out and checked the car. Broken plastic. A grill was missing. But the car could go on. It had survived. Sadly, the deer was totaled. On day 4, the plan was to drive through Zion National Park and then spend the night at an Airbnb in Cedar City, Utah. But on the way, I wanted to stop at a place I'd spotted on day 2. So we grabbed some breakfast to go in Kanab and pulled off on a dirt road north of town, where we ate breakfast from the hood of the car. Because I wanted to fly this. This is Diana's throne. It turned out to be Co-op Creek limestone of the Carmel Formation. It contains marine fossils that were deposited in a shallow sea long ago. Geologists call it the Sundance Sea. Majestic, intriguing, spectacular, and all that remains of the ancient Sundance. I love the yellow colors. Don't you just want to climb those cliffs or explore that cave? I wish we had more time to hike around. I didn't even know about the Slot Canyon on the north side. I could have flown all day here, but it was on to Zion. The drive into the east entrance of Zion was nothing short of spectacular.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you.
Thank you.
Most of the rock is the Navajo sandstone once again, laid down as huge deposits of sand dunes long ago. The largest known sand desert in the history of our planet. In Zion, the layer is over 2,000 feet thick. The Carmel Tunnel was unexpected. It was completely dark, and it went on and on and on. There's no light at the end of this tunnel. Sort of like our whole trip.
So, presumably we have phone service there so we can buy tickets online.
Yeah. We will check into it.
The lily white rocks at the top have had the reddish iron deposits bleached out of them by time.
Tourists. This time the wife got out of the car and she was taking a picture of him.
We could stop and take another picture. Just follow through the park.
We parked and took the shuttle up the main canyon and started down a trail. But the afternoon sun was hot, so we ended up just stopping at a watering hole. After we left the park at the south end, we drove around to the northwest side and up to the Kolob Canyon's viewpoint, where there was a spectacular view of the canyons, from the vantage point of looking directly up several of the parallel canyons toward the mountain peaks at their tops. It was late in the day, and I wanted to try to repeat my photographic success at the North Rim. There was a lot to choose from for compositions, but I finally settled on the northern peak of Timbertop Mountain. Here's my composition. I was drawn to the yellow cliff wall on the right, and the one peeking out from behind on the other side. I took many pictures as the sun went down and the shadows grew longer. A lady asked me what I was doing, and she proclaimed that I must be very patient. I suspect she was really thinking that I was rather crazy, especially with all the biting little flies. Let's see how the pictures came out. This is early on, when the shadows were short. This is later. And later still. I think this one's my favorite. I grabbed a couple of other shots as well. And here is the final image with very dramatic shadows. Someday we will return to this area and spend more time. But having done the tourist stops of Bryce and Zion, we look forward to exploring the little out-of-the-way places more. We left Cedar City and headed across the empty heartland of Nevada on Highway 50, taking us through Ely, Eureka, Fallon, Silver Springs, and Carson City. One mountain range after another. It was a long day of driving, and it really wasn't what I expected. I expected more salt flats and a drier desert with less vegetation. Day 6 would be a tourist day at Lake Tahoe. We would head to Lincoln, California at the end of it. I talked Kathleen into camping the night before. We stayed at Turtle Rock Campground, south of Markleeville. We'd gone for a little hike, and Kathleen spotted a bear. It looked just like the one on the state flag, although that one's a grizzly. Black bears and brown bears and black bears that are brown. Anyhow, it was nice to be back in California again. On the way to the lake, I was looking for places to fly my drone. I saw the edge of this interesting landscape, and there was an out-of-the-way place to pull off and fly, so we stopped. This is what I love about flying the drone. Even if I spent the day hiking, there would be no way to get this view. Just look at it. It's stunning. This is Hope Valley, one of my new favorite places. If you look in the distance, you can see the West Carson River meandering through the meadows. If I lived near here, I'd come back again and again, to fish, to hike, to photograph, in all seasons. I live in a forest on a mountain, but we have nothing like this. Of all the mountains I know, the Sierra Nevadas are the most dear to me. There's just something about that granite.
Just don't push any of the buttons.
Smile and wave.
Our next stop was Inspiration Point above Emerald Bay. It was crazy busy, and it took forever to find a place to park. That's Fanette Island, the only island in this huge lake. There's a stone structure on top that looks like a tiny castle called the Tea House. Kathleen wanted to put her toes in the water, so this is Kiva Beach. I remember coming to one of these beaches as a kid with my cousins. Worst sunburn I ever had. Soon we were off to Lincoln. Highway 60 follows the South Fork of the American River, which ultimately meets the Sacramento River in Sacramento. In Lincoln, we spent 3 relaxing days with the Brookses. They were intrigued by my drone, so the next day we all went up to Auburn State Park to fly it along the river. This is the Forest Hill Bridge, also known as the Tall Green Bridge. It's the 4th highest in the U.S. This is the place where the North Fork of the American River, below us, meets the Middle Fork. This historic bridge was built in 1912. At the time, it was the longest concrete arch bridge in the world. It was built by the Portland Cement Company to connect their limestone quarry and was originally called the Mountain Quarry Bridge. While more modern bridges nearby were washed out in floods, and even when the Hellhole Dam collapsed, it remained. Today it's called the No Hands Bridge and is used by horse riders, runners, and hikers. It got its name from Ina Robinson, who would drop her reins to ride across it before they put in guardrails. On the way back, we made a quick stop in Auburn at the Placer County Museum, which is the old county courthouse. We had a nice, relaxing time with the Brookses, and they fed us very well. The next stop was the Crinklaws in Reedley. The drive down Highway 99 was a bit difficult, as we expected. This wildfire had the traffic held up for quite a while. Our little Prius was soon making its way down my parents' long driveway. Unfortunately, all of the extended family, except for my sister-in-law Tricia, were away in Florida, which was disappointing. But she flew up and we had a nice dinner together. She flies a Carbon Cub that can take off and land on a dime.
Look, there it is.
It was my dad who had gotten me into flying drones, so we had a little fun one evening. And Harry joined us too.
Control when I get really close. I'm gonna go over here.
We had a nice time in Reedley, and Harry's getting pretty good at playing the guitar.
Ooh, I messed that one up.
It was time for the long drive home. We stopped to visit Harry at his flight school in Bakersfield, and then drove to Flagstaff to spend the night. In the morning, the air was thick with smoke from the fire that we had seen from the Grand Canyon. Our last day of driving took us through Indian country in New Mexico, past the VLA, and we arrived home around sunset. As our fleeting summer passed, our thoughts turned to family, the places we had seen, and the open road.